All right, welcome back to the Gentleman Badass Podcast. My name is Josh. With me, as usual, is McDoyle.
Hello.
And today we've got an excellent guest, a guy I've gotten to know a little bit over the last year, maybe a little bit longer than that, Charlie Youngblood. So Charlie is one of our jiu-jitsu students, and he's got kind of an interesting story, has an interesting job, so we're going to probably get into all of that. So Charlie, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Truly, I hope I live up to the title.
Well, we kind of like to just get an idea of your background, where you grew up, what that was like, early life. So give us a little idea of what it was like to be a young Charlie.
I guess, so I was born at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, at the Marine Corps base.
Okay.
My parents were in the military. And then for a while, we moved to California, to Long Beach, California, or Orange County mostly. And then when I was 13, we moved here to Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay. So you're born into the military lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why'd your parents end up here?
My dad got out of the Navy, and the people he was in the Navy with were actually from Omaha.
Ah.
And so they, set up shop here. And so it was news. It was new to me. Yeah, I came here. This is the first time I ever saw snow. So, we moved on December 24th.
Wow.
That year.
Sounds like your first trip to America.
Yeah. rough awakening.
So what was it like growing up on the military bases?
I thought I was, again, I don't really know. I just loved it. Because it was everywhere we were was warm. So I guess my parents' way of parenting was, okay, you're fed, now get out of the house. And so I have 3 older brothers, and we would just go outside all day.
Okay.
And most of the Navy housing at the time was in like cul-de-sacs, right? And so if you were from one cul-de-sac, basically every other cul-de-sac was the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. And so in a cul-de-sac, there would probably be like 10 duplexes, maybe. And it seemed like everybody had 4 or 5 kids.
Really?
And so there'd always be, especially at Long Beach, there'd be like 40 kids outside in the cul-de-sac. I mean,
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So they're like gang wars between cul-de-sacs? Yeah.
Rock fights, yeah. I tell people, no, we had rock fights, right?
Yeah.
You'd have like a garbage can lid, or they had giant tinker toys at the time, so you'd maybe make a club out of it. And we would it was sort of like Braveheart, you would just run at each other.
I feel like we need some more of that these days.
Yeah, it wouldn't be bad.
There's a lot of fireworks in California, too. It seemed like all the time, so you'd be launching, throwing fireworks, all of it. And I think they'd lock you up in Child Protective Services. If my kids are out doing that, I'd be like...
firing ball rockets at the neighbors.
Yeah. And
I've still got a scar on the back of my calf from a Roman candle war.
Yeah.
Somebody snuck in one of those exploding, you got them that just shoot the fireballs, or the fireballs that then explode. Well, it hit the back of my calf right as it exploded. So, So grew up military, eventually ended up joining the military, and I'm not quite sure of the time frame. So
I grew up here. I went to college, undergrad in Chicago, and graduated there in 90.
Okay.
From undergrad. And from there, I just kind of, as you guys were asking me earlier, I would I had a massive drinking problem at the time, and I smoked dope all the time. It was kind of a neo-hippie or whatever you want to. And so about the same time I graduated from undergrad, really what happened to me is I was down in Guatemala, actually, working for Loyola University. And I got in a lot of trouble in Guatemala from drinking. When I would drink, I would take off my clothes. I was loud. It was just not good. And we were in these little villages, building orphanages or something. So I angered all the villagers. They revoked my visa.
Wow.
And all these people that we were on this trip with were, you know, they all sat me down the morning after, I guess, and most of them, they were all women, which is kind of why I went on the trip. I mean, these are 8 like hippie chicks, right? And I thought, oh, that'll be good. And they were all upset. I'd ruined their lives. They'd planned this forever. And I thought, somebody that was in trouble with me, they said, you know, too much shit like this has happened to me. And something clicked in my head. Like, you know, I'm like, yeah.
What age are you at this point?
22.
22.
So when did that kind of become a part of your life? When did alcohol start kind of creeping in, or how did that happen?
I don't remember not being there. I mean, my parents, God love them. They were great parents. But they would. It was the 70s. It was California. I mean, they would just have massive parties, and it was just kind of commonplace. They would have pig roast. They'd invite everybody they knew. My brothers and I would cook all the food all day, and yeah.
Okay.
It was just there.
Yeah.
And they all drank, and they were all, a lot of them were, I think, in that category.
Okay.
So yeah, it was always there.
Okay.
It was never like ooh, we're venturing off into the realm unknown or anything.
Well, you're down in Guatemala. It all kind of comes to a head. Is that when you started to make changes, or?
Sort of, okay. Right? And so while I was down there, I was working for this Jesuit priest through Loyola, and we were living in a convent while we were doing all this stuff, and I went to one of the nuns in the convent. She was an American nun. The rest of the nuns were Guatemalan, Indian, and I said, you know, I keep ending up here, right? Where I don't feel like I'm a mean guy, but I keep making everybody angry and these other things. I said, this isn't the first time, etc. And this nun said, you know, I know some people back in Chicago, they got the same problem like you do. And that's the way she said it. And she gave me a phone number, and I was like, oh, okay. And being the way I was, I think at the time, you know, I got out of Guatemala, I got back to Chicago, and I just, I was smart enough to know that drinking was a problem. I was bad health, everything. I mean, you guys can see me, I'm 6'4", I weighed 158, 160 pounds, maybe. Wow. I mean, all I did was drink really beer. That was most of my calories. Wow. And I smoked cigarettes, chain smoked, and I came back. I got back to Chicago, and I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna stop all that. And I went back. I had a job previously, tenant bar. I went back to tenant bar, and I just wanted to tear the world down. I was just like, I was angry it wasn't like a conscious, like, but I went to the dentist at the time because my teeth hurt. I thought I had a bunch of cavities. They're like, no, you're just grating your teeth.
Wow.
And
that much kind of angst built up.
I was just angry, and you know, I was making nothing in tips because I was just such an asshole. You know, I was just like, I'm tending bar, I'm serving people drinks. I'm like, oh, this guy. Just everybody was an asshole, and I didn't realize I was the problem, really. And I'd never thought of myself as an angry person. I always thought I'm pretty mellow, but truthfully, I was mostly just stoned, you know. And so stopping all those things that made me sort of feel normal, I guess, now I felt off, like nothing made sense at all. And I ended up going to an AA meeting by accident, you know. I walked in the wrong room in this one building, and there was an AA meeting going on, which is, I guess, a different story, but they called their AA meeting to order and I was sort of in the back of the room. I couldn't get out. I sort of sat down because I didn't want to look like an idiot. And, I mean, I knew what it was vaguely. And so they were all people that were sort of my age. And I can tell you this, it was not what I thought. What it was these people told I thought the funniest jokes. Like, they were so funny, and they were all laughing about it. And it was all shit that we had done that other people would look at us like, what's wrong with you? And these guys were laughing about it. Oh, I used to do that. And I was like, wow, this is not what I thought. And so there was a loud guy from the south side of Chicago. He was the one leading the meeting, talking all the time. And I said, how do you do this? I walked up to him afterwards, like, what is this? He's like, well, you need to get a sponsor. And I said, I don't know what that is. And he goes, well, you just got one. And so he said, come down to the L, because Loyola, where it was right by the L station. He said, come down, we're going to go get a Coke at the Wendy's. And, and so we sat down there, and he's like, well, what happened? I was like, what do you mean, what happened? He goes, why'd you come to an AA meeting? And I said, oh, it was an accident. I was trying to make some copies. They gave me the wrong directions, etc. And he said, okay, well, then why the hell did you stay? He goes, why would you stay, right? And I said, well, it's pretty funny. He goes, that's only funny to people that are alcoholics.
Yeah, doing this stuff.
And I was like, oh. And so he just said, so walk me through what happened, how you ended up here. And I said, like, again, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, why don't you start with when you started drinking and finish with about an hour ago.
Damn.
And so I wrapped that up in about 10 minutes, And I said, I don't know if I have a drinking problem. And he's like, oh, yeah, you do. And he said, look, you can do it or you cannot do it. It's entirely up to you. He said, what I want you to do tonight to see if this is what you really want, go someplace quiet. He's like, I don't care what it is. You can go to church. You can go wherever. And he said, just ask whatever your higher power is, a God, call it whatever you want. Just ask him, am I supposed to do this? And then just wait for an answer. He goes, if the answer is yes, call me at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And he handed me a big book, the AA book, and said, you'll read 10 pages of this a day. Then you'll call me at 5 o'clock, not 5:05, not 4:55. And then he gave me his number, and no shit, it was the same number that the lady in Guatemala.
Really?
Wow.
And I was like, oh, shit. I mean, because you can't argue with blood like that, right? So I did. I went out to the lake, right, there in Chicago, and yeah, I just kind of just laid out there like, is this what truthfully, I don't even know if I'd call it like a prayer per se. I was just like, is this, what am I fucking supposed to do? What, and something turned, like it was sort of what they call a burning bush variety of, yeah, I knew I was supposed to, this is exactly what I was supposed to do. And I don't know, to describe it, it was like this massive weight or whatever, these knots I had just went away. And
in that moment where you kind of realize, like, okay,
yeah,
awesome.
This thing is bigger than me, and
yeah, and I'm not an emotional guy, but I was like, yeah, I had tears. I'm like, holy shit. So I called him at 5 o'clock the next day, and off I went.
So what do you think? And granted, you may not be an expert or you're not an expert, whatever. But what are some markers? What should people look for if they think, do I have a problem? If they think, do I have a problem? Do they have a problem? Like what do you think? What's your opinion on that?
There used to be that little questionnaire. They put it out in Dear Abby, right? If you've had more than whatever, if you drink before, whatever. And I was answering, oh, yeah. And, if you answer more than 2, right? I was like, oh, maybe I'll change some of these. But, I think that it was the sole focus. Like, even if, I had a hard time when I was first getting sober. Like these guys, this group of guys, they called themselves Resentmentville. They met on the south side of Chicago, and they dragged my ass everywhere. And they'd be like, "Hey, we're gonna go out tonight." I'm like, "What are you gonna do where you're not gonna be drinking?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "That does what?" And they're like, "Well, we're going bowling." I'm like, "How the fuck do you bowl without being just drunk?" I didn't. Everything I did involved it in somehow, or being somehow in whatever you want to call it, an altered mind. But if I wasn't that way, then I didn't do it.
How were you doing in school with all this stuff?
Which is, I mean, it's kind of weird because I would use it as a marker, but truthfully, school just comes natural. Like I would take tests over stuff I had nothing about, and I would do fine. And so I would thought, oh, I'm doing great. Obviously, I have all A's, but
Yeah.
you know, at one point in here, probably a couple years before all this, I signed up for a creative writing class because, again, lots of hippie chicks in those creative writing classes, and I thought that'll be fun. And I was there, and I did their assignments, which I thought you can make up your homework. This is awesome, right?
I felt
Make
the
it
same
up.
exact way.
And at the end of it, the guy who, and his name was Dean Young, and he was actually Pulitzer Prize winning poet. I didn't know. He's like, we have this creative writing major, and if you're interested, please sign up. And Charlie, and he threw me all the info. So in undergrad, I was a creative writing major.
Okay.
But admittedly, even if it's a standardized test, like I can take, I can just take them.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to know it.
Interesting.
Okay.
So then we've got a couple different directions. We've got the military, we've got med school. What happened first?
The military.
Okay.
Actually, because I got sober, and these guys sober, and it took a while for the fog to clear. I think that when I was getting sober, because I realized that I'm academically probably on the ball, right? I can do that. I think I was arrogant. I think that I had a lot of self-centeredness, and and especially if something came very easy to me, or if it didn't come very easy to me, I wouldn't do it. And so, yeah, what job are you going to get with a creative writing major, right? So I was laying floors, framing houses. But I did take, admittedly, during that time between, I traveled the world quite a bit because I thought, I think I can do this. And so I would go places, and I would work kind of like menial jobs just to pay my rent, and then all my stuff in a duffel bag.
Yeah.
Like I worked in the canneries up in Alaska. Then I went to Japan, and I taught English.
So many of our
Small
guests all seem to have kind of done this vagabonding thing where they went away and traveled, and kind of, as they were seeking a path, they left kind of the nest, the security of friends, and just kind of went on these adventures.
Yeah.
It just seems to be such a common theme among people that have this profound kind of bounce back.
Yeah, I think part of it was, hey, maybe if I change my surroundings, maybe that's part of it. But I went and lived in Europe for a couple of years. And then I sort of came back, and then I was in Colorado. I was, basically doing construction. Like I told you guys earlier, I had a sponsor who I would meet with regularly, and yeah, I was bitching all the time, admittedly. I'm like, this sucks. I don't make any money. You name it, right? It hurts. Laying floors hurts my knees. And he's like, and he bluntly, it was him who said, yeah, this isn't what you wanted to do with your whole life. There's a shocker, right? So what do you want to do with your whole life? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, why don't you fucking figure that out?
Yeah.
And don't call me and don't come bitching to me until we're sure of it.
Yeah.
And he told me to do it basically the same way that I got sober. He said, go somewhere quiet, get a little meditative. It's like, all right, what am I supposed to do? And so I thought I did that. And, I thought, being a doctor would be pretty cool. But again, I didn't have any money. And so, I joined the Navy because I thought I'm going to join the Navy and then I'm going to use them to pay for whatever I want to do.
Okay. So did you go to school then in the Navy? Did you finish? Or
So I was in the Navy a year plus, and then I went to med school from there.
And they took care of all of it for you?
Yeah.
And then
I didn't know there were scholarships for that shit. It was before Google, before the internet, right? And when I applied to medical school, I literally took, because like each application costs like, $50 or $75 or something at the time, and you had to mail in the postcard. And so I took the first 3 that came in the mail because that was my rent, right? Yeah. And so, and it was Creighton, it was UNMC, and Dartmouth, and or New Hampshire, sorry.
Yeah.
So.
Where'd you end up?
At Creighton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And mostly I got in everywhere, which I thought, I guess, again, with school, I just thought, that happens to all people that apply to medical school. But no, it's not the case at all. And so it was very weird for me when I showed up in medical school and I was talking with people in my class and they're like, oh, I had to apply like 5 times. I was like, what?
What'd you do wrong?
Yeah, I was like, and they had like a master's in anatomy. I was like, but they were looking for people like me who were maybe a little bit older, non-science majors, what they call a non-traditional student.
A little worldly. He'd been to some other places, maybe? Okay.
They were actually looking for those kind of people because I think that med schools as a whole went through this whole period where they were graduating people that maybe were book smart but had no people skills whatsoever.
Okay.
So I got lucky. Yeah.
So the way it worked then, back then, when you're going through medical school, are you going to have to pay back the military with some service?
Yeah,
or how does
for a year, right? Every year of training in the military, we accrue another year that we own. So they count med school as training because they paid me as a lieutenant back then.
Okay.
So
then when you graduate, did you become an officer?
Yeah, I was already an officer.
Okay.
And so, then I went from there to Portsmouth.
Okay.
But I was in the Navy, and I was a doctor in the Navy at that point.
Okay. And then how long were you a doctor in the Navy? And what did that look like?
After that point, decade, yeah.
Okay.
Easily a decade. From Portsmouth, I was at Portsmouth, and I actually was up on temporary duty up at Bethesda when 9/11 happened. And so 9/11 was sort of that as it did with most people in America, changed the trajectory of quite a bit.
What was it like to be serving that day in particular? And especially probably being worldly and having seen other cultures, I'm sure you recognize that this was going to change a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that especially Navy career, I could look at it prior to 9/11. It was like Love Boat Navy. Come on, it was like, we're gonna wear these ice cream uniforms, and this is just gonna be good time. But right then, especially on that day in particular, being at Bethesda and so close to the Pentagon, right? I mean, it was weird. I was in the OR. And you get it they come in, they give you a break occasionally, and so I came out of the OR, and somebody said, "Oh, a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center," and I was watching it like whatever news that was on, and when the second plane hit, right, the other tower, and I was like, "What?" It was kind of like, "Wait, what?" And then the whole place went bananas, like the whole place, like every alarm, and it was just crazy. And we put together basically a crew to go over to the Pentagon because it's a mass casualty situation, right? But it was all just smoke and flames, and but really what I thought there was, and only in retrospect, truthfully, because there was a lot of, especially doctors were like, "Well, I didn't sign up for this shit," and I'm like, "Yeah, you did. I mean, you cashed the check. I mean, you joined the military, whether you like it or not. You better pay back what you owe." But I think at that point I got a real idea of what does this mean, right? So it was. It was it was 180.
Yeah.
In attitude, I guess.
So how did it change after that? Deployments for you, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty constant, right? And so I first went down. My next duty station was at Camp Lejeune, so they put me with the Marines, and I was a battalion surgeon with the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines.
Okay. And
we were part of the initial invasion into Iraq.
Okay.
And was that 2004?
Okay.
What kind of stuff were you seeing?
It was, I have to admit, I personally, and even with like getting sober, like the lady in Guatemala, I sort of would bop through life like, all right, I'm just going to take whatever's coming. And it was the same thing there. I had no idea walking into a Marine infantry unit what the hell I was just in for. I had tried to do stuff in the Navy that I thought you should do this because the Navy's only like fly a chopper, fly airplanes, but I'm really colorblind, so they kept ruling me out for everything. I tried to be an undersea medical officer, be a diver, ruled me out for colorblind again. I even went in and memorized all those, those color number stone things. Yeah. Like I can't see barely but 2 of them. But I looked at the answers and I memorized it, and then I went back. I'm like, can I try that test again? Yeah. And then they're like, oh, then they gave me a different one, blinking lights, and so then they said stop. And but I had a friend of mine who was a Marine, and he said, look, if you want to do all this stuff, come with the Marines, and they will let you do all of it. He goes, but you got to get in the dirt. You got to be a Marine. And so that was the best advice I got, truthfully. And so I went down 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and the colonel in the infantry unit. The colonel owns you, right? He's the king of the castle. The very first day is just like, you're a Marine officer, and this is what very much like the guy from A Few Good Men. And he tried to look like him too, and I was like, I was sitting there thinking, I got no idea what the hell it means. Yeah. But all right, I'm all in. Okay. And so, again, I didn't think, oh, this is gonna make it. I'm just like, all right, it's not going along to get along. I think they were just signing me up for shit to see if I would go do it. So they signed me up for, they're like, do you want to go learn how to shoot the M16? I'm like, sure. And so I didn't know that meant I had to go to the School of Infantry and go through that and live at the range. But yeah, whatever they said, I always said, yeah, I'll go do that.
So then, what was what was it the day to day there?
In the battalion, what would happen is I would be out PTing by 5 a.m. And we have a sick call rotation, right, where you can basically, it was a room. There was a couple, I guess, a wing where if you were sick that day as a Marine, you could sit on these benches outside and we would process you through as quick as possible. And so, again, my buddy who's a Marine is like, don't let anybody come to sick call. And so I would come in from PT where they threw me off of buildings. They did all kinds of shit to me. And I showed up and I had like leaves and I was covered in dirt, and it's 6 a.m. and I'd walk through sick call and I'm like, you better fucking be sick. If I'm here, right? You better be sick. And so my sick call went to 0. Like,
People knew they're not going to pull one over on you.
Yeah. Like I'd go to other battalions and there would be lines out the door. They'd be doing sick call all day and I'd be done by 6:15. Like, you better be sick. But, and then the rest of the day, again, it depended on what training exercises we were doing. And then they started humping, which I didn't really know what that meant, full pack hiking around. I think they started at 3 or 5 miles, and then we went up by 3 miles every other week, right? And we were up to, I think 18 miles or so, with the plans to go to 24. But then we got word we're deploying.
Okay.
So then it was get everybody ready to deploy.
Okay.
Which was, again, I didn't really know what that meant. And there was nobody to guide me because nobody had been basically in a war since Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd have Navy higher-ups who would tell me, oh, just do this. I'm like, that doesn't even apply to my reality. Nobody had been in the field doing anything medical since Vietnam.
Wow.
And so I had no guidance whatsoever. And again, I got very lucky. So I had a chief who was a new chief, right, enlisted with me. And he sort of wants to make his name, right? That's his gig. And he had just come out of the School of Infantry where he was, and then he was new chief to the battalion. And he basically, I got lucky because so what the Navy did is we got word we're deploying, so they try to get you up what they call TO, table of order. So I'm supposed to have, I forget how many corpsmen, 80 corpsmen or something like that. And I had 30 or right? And so they start sending them to me from everywhere. And if you're, an office pogue up in Bethesda, and you're like, oh, they want some of my corpsmen, who are you gonna send me? You're gonna send me all your fat bodies. You're gonna send me all the people, your problem kids, right? And so I had 30, 40 people coming in. And the colonel, I remember he's like, get the fuck up here to my office. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I go up there, and the new preacher was a Navy guy, and he was 350. And he was just like,
wow.
No.
Wow.
They were livid, and they were mad at me. I'm like, dude,
and you guys are getting ready to deploy, and you got to train all these people.
Get them in deployment shape. And what I was lucky to have my chief is, I'm like, what are we gonna do? And so he's like, why don't we just do for PT what we did at basically the field medical school? And we would do the buddy carry, fireman carry, right across this, 100 yards one way, and then you put them down, and then they would carry you back 100 yards. So we kept doing that to get people in shape. And so the whole time I'm getting instructions from the Navy, oh, look, it's mission accomplished, right? You're going to be over there winning hearts and minds. et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
It couldn't be further from the truth, right? And so when we hit the ground, we actually flew into Kuwait, and that's where they first give you live ammo. And I had a guy who was scared from deployment to go into the mess. Like, he literally got his ammo, walked into the shitter there and just shot himself.
Oh.
Right? Like, I just shot myself through the meat. I'm like, dude, you just took out your transverse colon, but so didn't go over well with the Marines, right? So yeah, they charged him with cowardice in the face of the enemy and all these other things, and they even docked his pay, the nickel for the bullet. But so we had to drive in from Kuwait, and we started taking casualties the minute we crossed into Iraq.
Yeah.
Were you prepared for that?
No. Again, everybody above me or around me was, like, you're going to be like setting up clinics and shit like that. I think the people that did prepare me were the Marines. They're like, no, we're always going to prepare for, it's going to be horrible. And out of the 1,200, I think we had 1,200 Marines that deployed out of the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines. We had like 385 casualties, I think.
So what's a day in the life dealing with that stuff like?
You'd be surprised what you can get used to, I guess. Yeah. And it turns out in those kinds of settings, this is where I think of like a higher power, the things I tried to get in touch with when I was sober. This is like taking care of me. Like, is this where I'm supposed to be? It puts me on this path because on the battlefield, right? When, so now I'm a combat doc and there's nobody to ask for help. I was good at it.
You're the guy.
Yeah. And, we did well.
Yeah.
And, they're giving you medals up the wazoo, and I think truthfully it goes back to my chief who's like, hey, let's do the buddy carry. Let's do all these things to get people in shape, because I had corpsmen running out in the field of fire, grabbing a Marine with all their shit on and throwing them on their back and running them right out of there. And not my doing. I just got lucky,
Yeah.
trying to get the fat preacher and shit. But what I found there, which I didn't think if I looked at my younger life, like I didn't think the Marines or the military or even in a war zone, like I was a hippie. I didn't think this was going to be my gig, but I seemed to do well in those situations.
Do you know what it was? Was there something that made it that way? It was just natural, or?
Yeah, I think that maybe it's that sort of lack of foresight.
Yeah.
Like, there's bullets. I'll just go get that guy. Like, my chief one time, he's yelling at me. He's like, good Lord, would you duck down? I'm like, oh. But, so I think I'm very lucky in that regard.
Well, that stuff also adds up. It takes a toll.
Yeah.
What was the aftermath, or maybe not even the aftermath? What was that toll like for you?
Physically, yeah, for sure. But, I don't know if I realized it. So, like one place, we were in a place called Mamadiya. So especially on that first deployment with the Marines, I was never out of what they call the Sunni Triangle or Triangle Death. Our whole area of operations was always in there. And so one place we were in Mamadiya, like it was right by a highway, the most dangerous highway in the world, whatever. Went right by it, and they would drop mortars into the compound, the compound that the Marines took it over. It used to be a chicken processing plant, which learned more about salmonella and shit than I ever wanted to learn moving in there. But it was only like 200 yards across. So you got 1,200 Marines with all their trucks, Humvees, right, all that in a tight area, and they basically kept track of how many days in a row we got mortared, and it was 72 days.
Wow.
But it's amazing what you can learn to live with, I think. But when I came back from that initial deployment, it was my wife who told me, like, wow, you're way more angry than you used to be. And loud noises, I'd just shoot across the room. And so again, I never realized I was getting more tense and things like that. I don't think. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. What ended up helping with that?
Here. Time.
Yeah.
I did not have as bad as some people, but yeah, I still get sleepless. I do. I get nights I can't sleep.
Well, then let's get into that, because I mean, that's where this kind of the idea of this podcast started, was meeting you coming into the gym. And I'd been aware of Larry's ear for a long time, and then Mick got him addicted to jiu-jitsu, and then he dragged you along with him, or at least convinced you to come join.
Well, I called him because I should 3.5 years ago, so I had cancer, right? All in the middle of COVID, which is a little bit of a weird, like, I was just bopping along. I'd run all the time to stay in shape. I thought I was fairly healthy. And then when COVID hit, it cleared out the hospital. There was no business. And so I'm in my mid-50s now. And so I thought, all right, there's no business down in GI, which we normally staff every day. Like mid-50s, I'll go get my annual colonoscopy. So I walked down there on a Friday, and I said, hey, can I just sign up for my colonoscopy next Monday? And they're like, sure. There's nobody here.
Yeah.
Because it normally wasn't that way. You'd be like 3-6 months out. And I never would have done it if COVID hadn't hit and cleared out all the business. So yeah, I had a colonoscopy then on Monday, and they're like, yeah, you have cancer. This is serious. We've got to do stuff right now.
Wow.
And so I ended up having adenocarcinoma. And it was kind of freaky. Originally, they said, look, we think it's invaded these other areas. You're probably going to have a colostomy bag, which I was like, oh, that's the thing. I was like, really? But I'm like, all right, let's do it. And thankfully I didn't. But so I had a right hemicolectomy done. And I never had surgery before. I mean, I'd do some stuff on my stitches on myself or something, but nothing. And I thought, I'll be all right after a little bit. And it laid me out way more than I thought. And
did you have to do radiation or chemo in addition to it?
No, they originally were signing me up for radiation, and then they said, no, we're just going to monitor it, because they pulled it out, and basically the cancer had gone up into my appendix, and it was really big, and the surgeon, who's a very nice guy, he's like, your appendix was getting ready to burst, and then you would have cancer everywhere.
Oh. Wow.
He's like, I'm surprised you didn't already get, but he's like, we would have thought you had an appendicitis. And so he actually gave me a bigger zipper than usually they just go through your belly button and do all that, but I've got a little bit of a zipper. He's like, I didn't want that thing to even break. But so thankfully I had to go get scanned. I had to get colonoscopies all the time. So they just make sure it's not going anywhere else.
So there was no indication. Just happened to walk in, found this cancer that probably could have been fatal if it went much longer.
Yeah.
So you're saying people should probably pay attention to this type of stuff and maybe get checked out pretty
yeah,
regularly.
They should. And I was sitting in the follow up to it, the many doctor's appointments, and one thing so I was sitting there, and the doctor came in. He's like, "What's wrong with your hands?" I'm like, nothing. He's like, "No, you need to go see the rheumatologist." So then they diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis, which I just thought I was getting old.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they said, "Hey, we want you to go get your eyes checked because some of the medicines are going to be on. We need to watch your eyes." And then I went into the eye doctor and like, "You have bilateral cataracts," and I was like, I was mad. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not that old, right? That's old people stuff, rheumatoid. And anyway, so that was all in 6 months,
Yeah.
But what happened is, like, I would get to the end of the day, and it wouldn't even be the end of the day. It'd be like 2:00 in the afternoon or even noon, and I would just be completely exhausted. I mean, I would just, I could go to bed right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, I thought, this is the way it is, right? And they told me I can't run anymore because it always felt like I was stepping on a marble, right? And they're like, "Oh no, you have rheumatoid arthritis in your foot." I had it my whole life. I didn't even know.
Oh, wow.
Right?
You just kind of gotten used to the pain.
Yeah,
and
just all
dealing with
right.
it?
Yeah, just go ahead. All right, that's the way it is, right? And so, I didn't know any different. But then they took out my cataracts. I just remember that. And then I walked into the kitchen. I was like, "Good Lord, it's really bright in here." My kids were like, "This is normal." I was like, "Oh, wow."
I like this.
Yeah. But I think I put on a lot of weight just because a lot of weight for me. I was just sluggish. And I saw an interview with that guy from Modern Family, the old guy, Jay.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I was like 55." And then I thought, and he's like, "I was feeling lethargic." And he's like, "I started doing jujitsu and I feel great," So I actually called Larry and I said, "Hey, do you know anybody that does jiu-jitsu?" And he's like, "Yeah, we need to come in here." And that's when we started coming in here.
Yeah.
So he had already just started, though, right?
No, we
Oh, that's right. You
we
guys,
came
you
together.
guys did it together, yeah.
I think he was doing other stuff here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite things about being a jiu-jitsu coach is just watching the change of people that come in. And I remember when you first started coming in, I don't know if I was the first guy to train you or if Mick was, but you were just out of shape. Like you would, the grappling shape is a different kind of shape, and you'd grapple for a little bit and man, you'd just be wiped out.
Yeah.
But it turned around so quickly. I was really impressed. Every other week, it was like, man, you can go longer, you were you're losing weight. It was really cool to watch.
Oh, well, thanks,
and I imagine that's only continued. So
yeah, it was. I think first coming in here, it was pretty anxiety producing, right? Because I was used to, I think, being, like I said, I probably wouldn't try things if I wasn't good at it, right? But and being smothered or the feeling like you're gonna be smothered, that would just, like, my anxiety and a PTSD would just go through the roof, right? And I'm grateful you guys are very patient. Like, let's just get comfortable. Let's just sit here for a second.
yeah.
And I always think, oh, I look like an idiot. That was that's really probably the cause of the anxiety is I just don't want to look like a dick.
Yeah, but I think that's common though. People when they do, combat sports training or something like that, it's, we say in here all the time that it's learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and too many people don't even want to be uncomfortable in any capacity. But the thing that I notice is with you, to kind of piggyback what Josh was saying, is this almost freeing of your body that's kind of starting to happen, or happened quickly, and now I think you're into another kind of phase of that too, where the movements and stuff like that are just becoming a little more automatic to you now.
And I can tell you, when I'm not coming in here or not doing it, it's like I feel like the Tin Man. My body starts to sort of freeze up more, right? It's just more painful. My days are more painful. Physically, I think I'm doing a lot better.
Yeah.
But it's still, and Larry, I'm sure, is tired of me saying, I'm like, God, I just should be able to do more than that right now. And he's like, there's not too many 55-year-olds in here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's good. I'm glad that he's here with us. And
bet you wish he was about 100 pounds lighter, though.
that would be so much nicer.
Yeah.
He's 250 right now.
But truthfully, if we're in here and we're, I'd rather wrestle with the bull every day. So when I wrestle with a weasel, it's easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, and from a coaching perspective, you said you didn't want to look bad, and maybe I'm speaking for myself. I imagine Mick feels the same way. When someone comes in new to jiu-jitsu, you're not going to be good. We know that. We don't care if you're good or if you're out of shape or anything. Like, that's why you're here. The people that bother us are the people that aren't willing to work hard, aren't willing to listen. And so if you have those two things, the ability to work hard, the ability to listen, pay attention, like, I don't care what shape you're in, I don't care what athletic ability you have, come in, let's learn, let's figure it out. And, jiu-jitsu changes lives. So you talked about, if normally you wouldn't do something if it was challenging. Mm-hmm. What was it about jiu-jitsu that made you stick with it, even though it was challenging?
And I think part of it probably has to do with, I know, not to beat a dead horse, AA. Like, all right. If it usually, so I know what my character defects are, I think. And I mean, they wrote them down right in the title page of my book. Your number one problem is, one is I don't think I'm good enough no matter what I do. And then two is if I'm angry and I'm right, then I'm wrong. No matter what. I was like, those difficult pills for me to swallow. But something about coming in here, and I don't know if it's jiu-jitsu as a whole or in this place, I think it tends to be both, right? But because I've done it some other places, and I don't want to be mean to them, but I'm like, this isn't like home or whatever you want to say. But what I found, like in that first AA meeting, is something clicks, right? There's something that, whether it's my mind or my personality, like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Same thing here. And I think it's partly, the training, sure. But the camaraderie or whatever, the mix of personalities or whatever works for me. And I always take from it, like, the what's best advice somebody ever got when med school, like, it was hard. I had to actually pay attention and study, and I talked to this lady. She's a big defense attorney in town. And I was bitching to her, right? I don't know if I can make it. And she's like, well, have they thrown you out yet? I'm like, well, no. She's like, just keep showing up till they throw you out. And really, I think a lot of the Marines, same way. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm pretty sure it's illegal if they kill me, but I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And that's from all of it. And coming in here, I'm like, all right, I know that I don't want to do bad, but I'm gonna keep showing up till they tell me I can't. Let other people tell me no. Because I think a lot of times in my personal life, at work life, right, like being a chairman now. I don't think I'm chairman material, but all right, I'll just keep showing.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So it's a little kind of full circle a little bit for you right now, is that you still immerse yourself as a student, like in activities like jiu-jitsu, but then your day gig now has kind of changed a little bit too, because you're teaching.
Yeah,
too.
so I teach creative writing at Creighton and at the med school, and I teach humanities and ethics.
Wow.
Which, again, I'm always like, really? You guys think I'm qualified for this? But yeah, and again, I'll just show up. I'll do what I think is the right thing to do until somebody tells me different.
Well, that's interesting, because I knew you taught at Creighton, but I assumed it was medical stuff, because kind of your day job is what, anesthesiologist now?
I'm an anesthesiologist, yeah.
So you were a surgeon, if I heard right, in the military?
A battalion surgeon, so it's like all the medical for the whole battalion.
Okay.
So
was that like
surgery.
included, or was that extra school that you had to go to, or?
No, it's just, they just have at it.
Wow.
You get your, they always give out pins in the military, right? You get your Fleet Marine Force pin. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Doctor by day, professor. I know you get to do quite a bit of travel still, because when we were training, there's times where you'll go, I think it's Maine, you head to a lot.
Yeah, I went there just because I kind of wanted to see if I wanted to retire there someday. I'm like, all right, I'll work a little bit, pay it for it.
Yeah.
And what's the thing that you guys do with dogs too? Is that your wife's gig?
That's my wife's gig, yeah. So she trains, German Shepherds to do. Schutzen is their sport, but they get bred out for, I think, police dogs and all that stuff. So yeah, we always have a lot of dogs.
Fun. We're actually coming up almost on an hour. So
sorry.
No, that's excellent. That's what
great.
we want. It's nice when it flies by. And I think what you're saying is important for a lot of people to hear. So moving forward, what do you want to? What are you just kind of open to the universe, whatever the universe shows you, or whatever that higher power shows you? What do you want to do moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's always things that I always think, I should have done more here, or I should have done more there. There's always something to do. I think sitting around with nothing coming up, or that's pretty close to as dying as you can get, right? And so I would like to write more. And I every time I do it, it goes well. But I'm like, well, this is my day job. I got all these other things. So I think that's one. Like to finish the book, so to speak. And I've been starting to learn to play guitar. I want to be better at that.
Josh is your guy there.
I'm pretty addicted to buying guitars too.
Oh yeah?
It
becomes a problem. It becomes a problem.
But yeah, and I think just continue to be a good dad. Or I always think of my life somewhat. I think I'm lucky to be here. I think I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I've been able to do the things that I've done, I guess. So I hope, and I do think it circles back to AA type of things of, somebody did this for me. Somebody was there for me when I walked through the door. Somebody took their time with me. Why not? I mean, I think in my anesthesiology, it's monopoly money. There's such a shortage of us. They're like, wow, this is crazy, especially compared to what I made in the Navy. I'm like, wow, somebody's going to figure this out. I think I'm lucky to be here. Am I good at all the things I want to be good at? Probably not, but I get up most days and try at least.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I will tell you, guitar's not any easier than jiu-jitsu, but it's hurts a little bit less. at the beginning. I mean, the fingers and the wrists might hurt a little bit, but
nobody chokes you in the middle of it.
I think it would help if somebody did.
Probably.
So writing, have you written anything that we could read or that we find or?
I have like 5 college degrees, and that sounds really overachiever like, but it was all shit the Navy sent me to. So I wrote my master's thesis basically with, you put together a piece of a portfolio really, and so they published that, but that's probably only the 1 copies in the.
Are you wanting to write fiction then? Creative writing, obviously fiction, or?
I don't know. I think that, we'll see where it goes. Where I've started, is it, some of it's fiction, but really, we did a lot of crazy shit when I was, even getting sober. Even the story about the Guatemalan nun.
I'd read that book.
Make up
I'd
shit
read
like that.
Yeah, really.
And I think that I do find some of my life is interesting. I think, can you tell a good story though? But I think it really informs being a physician, being an anesthesiologist. I mean, because really a story or a spoken word, that's where the rubber meets the road. If you can't talk to people, you're going to suck, even in anesthesiology.
Yeah.
And so...
So when you write, is it something like weekly you say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes, an hour just writing?
And part of it is we started a writing group at Creighton called the 2500 California Avenue Writing Club. We started it right before COVID started, and we opened it up to all the faculty at Creighton. And so that's still going. Like it's going on 4 years. I really thought maybe this, would die out by now. But what it is a deadline that I've got to meet. And if I have no deadline, right, or no schedule, I will not do it. Yeah. Because it seems like there's so many things on my plate on a given day. Gotta be here, gotta be there. That if I don't make the deadline, it ain't gonna happen.
Makes sense.
It's just the way I am. I come to accept it.
Yeah.
I think I found my editor.
Yeah, there you go.
Because we start actually writing this manual during COVID. And then I kind of found myself stream of consciousness writing about how I got here, like not to the country. Well, I guess that's part of it, but kind of to this point too. And you got to read some of it, and I don't know if it's pugilist dementia, but I can't remember a person's name or stuff that I did yesterday. But I have these vivid memories of my childhood and especially my first few years here and fighting and all of that stuff. Like is just like it's like a movie in my head still. And so during COVID, as part of our plan to write this Gentleman Badass manifesto, I start writing these things down, and I'm like, I can still do this. I can still write. Yeah. But again, if I'm not dedicating the time to do it.
It's funny because I mentioned the idea, and that's where this whole idea of Gentleman Badass, it started as a book idea. I'm like, this book that I write. I've written a couple books, nothing published, just self-published. But I was like, hey, we should do this together. And then I'm kind of thinking, I don't know. Sometimes people think they can write and they can't. Yeah. And I don't know. And if Mick sends me something that sucks, I'm going to have to tell him it sucks. And I'm not looking forward to that. So he sent it to me, and it was great. It was funny. It was interesting. And I'm like, we might be onto something here. So we should start.
I was Young Writer of the Year in Ireland.
There you go.
There you go.
I did win that.
I think with writing or any kind of whatever they want to call it, creative arts, nobody wants to put it out there because nobody wants to be told, hey, this sucks, right? And I think especially the California writing group that we have, it's really not that way. We're just, you can write whatever you want. We're just here to, hey, when I read this, I didn't understand it, right? So but if we're unwilling to take whatever it is and put it out there, basically, there's part of it to being whatever you want to call it, an artist or creative person. Part of it has to come to the putting it out there part.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the hardest part. Just like walking in here was just repeatedly, because especially after the first time, I'm like, wow, that was really it was physically, that was really hard to come back the second time, right? Now I know how much it's going to suck, kind of thing. Writing is that way too. And I think that people that don't encourage it, or right, all right, here's the part of the bush that it needs some grooming, that kind of stuff. If it's not proactive or whatever, then they're not the
but I think
person.
by taking up a sport like jiu-jitsu, especially late in life, you've already decided that you're willing to accept feedback, and you're going to get instant feedback, typically from your own body, going, whoa, what's this? Let's go back to the couch. That was way easier. And even when you are being creative within jiu-jitsu and like, I have this idea, I'm going to try this, and then the move fails, you get that immediate critique of that sucked, and then hopefully you have some good coaches that help you edit the move and go, well, you're close, but here's what you actually need to do. Here's the part that you're missing. And so I think by putting yourself on the mat and into doing something like this, you've already adopted that lifestyle of like, show me. Show me, is there a better way? Like, I'm here.
Yeah, you gotta jump into the conversation at some point. And so, I think people are creative, not just in writing or painting, right? They could be a creative auto mechanic or whatever it is. They could be, I think there's people that are creative anesthesiologists, right? And it's something where our inner mind part starts to connect with the universal outside of us part, however that looks, right? It could be a song, could be, like I said, a core, it could be anything. But when we're not using that part of our head or our personality or whatever, I think that's the anomaly. And I've tried 1,000 things where I'm like, yeah, that ain't gonna work, right? Or that's not for me, right? Playing the drums or whatever. I'm like, nah.
One of the things I found interesting, being in jiu-jitsu, like, your best friends are trying to strangle you every single day. Your best friends. And when things don't work, you break it down and you talk. Or if somebody does a move wrong, I break it down. I'm like, okay, this needs to... And I have looked for that outside of jiu-jitsu, and it's very difficult to find. Like, when I write a song, if I give someone a song, I'm like, hey, what do you think? And if they're like, oh, that's good, it's like, well, I actually want to know, like, do I need to fix this? Or something more beyond a song. If I've written a book and I give someone and they take the time to actually read this book or whatever, I want to know if there's things that need to be fixed. And you find in the general population, people are too afraid to critique. Oh yeah, it's really good. Or they don't want to just, I would love to write something and have the red, marked up with red when I get it back from someone. That way I know what I need to fix, how to make it better. Because that's, I think people like us, that's what we're trying to be, is better. And if I can't get an answer, if I can't figure out what's wrong or what I need to do better, then I don't know what to do better. So one of the things that I've really benefited or found in jiu-jitsu is we just don't have that same thing. I have female clients. How much do you weigh? Well, that's too much. You need to, I couldn't say that in the general population or, anything like that. So, maybe we should start our own writing group so I can, you're a Creighton professor. I'll write something and give it to you and you can mark it up and tell me I suck.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's part of, we have to join into the, whatever it is, the conversation, right? And so, and what we tell the people in the writing group is like, look, we're not here to rip somebody apart, right? We're here to help them, right? As they will help us. And so we're on the same team. And, I think all these things, whatever you want to call it, team, tribe, right, or our group, whatever. That's what we're looking for. It's mutual cohabitability where we're both kind of got a little bit of respect for the other person as a human being, right? That, yeah, you got something to offer. I got something to offer. We're all in this mix together. That's when it works for me anyway. I mean,
we all
it's
have skin in the game.
yeah. That's exactly what clicked for me in AA that wasn't there before. You know, I felt very very individualistic, very, yeah, I would say self-centered. Like I was smart enough, I could get through, but something wasn't right. Right, I was warped in some way, and then yeah, I think that when I tend to find my tribe, I think anesthesiology was like that for me too. I'm like, hey, most of these guys are pretty cool. I think I can hang out with them, rather than be like a surgeon or whatever, or a psychiatrist, whatever. But it was every time that I feel like I'm participating in whatever we call it, a tribe or a higher power, or I'm in the flow, every time, then that is what works for me, regardless of the mechanics of what it is.
Excellent.
And then if I'm not getting that, I know it's not going to work.
Well, I think that might be a good point to end it on. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm just this place. I still don't understand it sometimes, even though I manifested it. But it's so cool that the mat, the ring, whatever, can take all these people from all these different walks of life, and nobody gives a fuck. Like if you're suffering with me, then you're one of us. It doesn't matter what you drove up in or, none of that stuff matters. It's the great equalizer. Because we're all getting humbled some way or another.
Yeah. There's something about it. Again, I've been to other places. I just don't get the same, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, feel or whatever. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful you put it here. I know for me, both physically and whatever you want, spiritually and emotionally, yeah, I'm glad whatever coincidence or whatever brought me here and you guys were here, etc. I'm grateful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just keep on keeping on.
We are too. We're grateful. Grateful to have you in the class. Thank you for coming on today.
Sure.
And you certainly lived up to it. Like definitely worthy of the seat.
I told him. I actually did say, I'm like, you know who? I said, here's how we should get. And he's like, really? And I go, Charlie's got some cool fucking stories, man. I go, he's lived a life already. I go, yeah, this is exactly.
Wow,
so
thank you.
Didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
excellent.
thanks.
Well, thank you so much. And we will see everybody later.